Good afternoon, Dr. Brearey.
Hello.
I ask questions on behalf of the former senior managers. I have some questions about what was or wasn't known by the senior managers at what time. We looked at the final report of the thematic review earlier today, but I would like to look, please, very briefly at the draft report. The first version, which is at INQ 0003-217 at page 7, please. Eventually, the themes identified were amended in the final report to add sudden deterioration and timings of arrest to the top of the list, weren't they?
Yes.
But, in its original iteration, we can see that you had placed delayed cord clamping in preterm deliveries as the number 1 theme identified. What caused you to amend that?
I wanted to put them in order of importance in the final version of the report.
Well, in fact, in this first draft, I don't think that sudden deterioration appeared at all, did it, as a theme?
No. It was a suggestion from Dr. Subhedar, as we have discussed already.
Now, you have dealt with the fact that there is no mention in the body of the report of Lucy Letby as a theme?
No.
Or as any nurse being a commonality, and you have explained that you regret not putting her presence or the presence of a nurse in that list.
Although her name was in the table with all the cases.
In the appendix. I would like to ask you, please, about the sharing of the thematic review, because your evidence today is that you sent it to Ian Harvey and asked him for an urgent meeting.
Yes.
You, I know, Dr. Brearey, have searched for the email that you say you sent to Ian Harvey asking for an urgent meeting.
Yes.
And you can't find it?
No.
Is it possible that you are wrong in your recollection about asking for a meeting with him?
I don't think so, no.
All right, well, I just want to come away from the thematic review for a moment to ask you about your knowledge of Child K, because we know that by the time you met with the CQC in the presence of Dr. Jayaram, there was a group of you, wasn't there, that was at the CQC meeting?
Yes.
Yes, that, earlier that day, Dr. Jayaram had witnessed Child K's collapse and had concluded that it was a shocking event and that the dislodging of the breathing tube had been deliberate. Did he mention that to you either before or around the time of your CQC meeting?
I can't remember him mentioning it, no.
No. If he had mentioned that to you, what would you have done with that information?
Well, I would have instigated a review of the case and spoken to him in detail. And if I was concerned, I would have shared that with others.
Yes, you would have brought it to the attention of the executives, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Yes. Because in his evidence at the criminal trial, he said he didn't make a note of it in his clinical notes for Child K. But it was one of the things that we discussed as a team together, and added to the list of concerns we already had, and escalated it to the senior management at the hospital. If he's right about that, you were not a member of the team for that discussion, and you didn't escalate it to the management, did you?
Well, that statement isn't dated, is it? So I don't know what date he's referring to that, because clearly we escalated our concerns of the morbidity cases when we were presenting the evidence to the policy inventory.
Yes. Well, we know from his evidence that he didn't mention it to any executive for 13 months, until his meeting with Sue Hodkinson on March 17th, 2017. When do you say you became aware of his conclusion that Letby had deliberately dislodged Child K's breathing tube?
I can't remember, and from my impression of his recollection of it, it was something that stuck with him, and I think all of us had these moments, and I think parents as well, where they experience something that is abnormal, such as an abnormal cry, or a light not being on when it should have been, which on its own at that time might not trigger immediate action, but stays in somebody's mind. And I don't know whether that's because you can't quite believe what you are trying to think, or whatever.
But I am asking when you became aware of it.
I can't remember.
I want to now take you to the meeting of May 11th, 2016, which you have been asked about. You tell us that what you sought from the meeting on 11th May, as well as discussing your thematic review, was the need for guidance on how to take things forwards?
Yes.
You described Arian Powell and Anne Murphy's behavior during the course of that meeting as countering your concerns forcibly and with great emotion. And you also said that they were emotionally driven and seemingly in denial of the facts.
Yes.
What was the relevance of the fact that they were, in your opinion, Dr. Brearey, acting with emotion?
Because I thought that certainly Arian's relationship with Letby was getting in the way of her objective analysis of the facts.
Right. Now, Arian Powell had brought with her the document that she had prepared following your meeting of May 5th, 2016, hadn't she?
Yes.
And that document had been emailed to you well in advance of this meeting?
Yes.
Yes, but you tell us today that you were too busy to read it?
Yes.
Yes. And you say that you were disappointed with the outcome?
Well, I was worried by the outcome. Yes, certainly.
Worried and disappointed?
Yes.
Yes. All right, let's look at your response, please. At INQ01031144. This is the email that you sent 5 days after the meeting to Dr. Jayaram and other consultants. And you also copied in Arian Powell and Anne Murphy. Arian, Anne and myself met Ian Harvey and Alison Kelly last week to discuss the rise in neonatal mortality last year. It was a helpful meeting, and they were grateful for the work we have done in the various reviews and involving an external clinician. Nothing there about you being disappointed?
I have said in my statement that I didn't think there was anything helpful in the meeting at all, and I regret writing that, and wrote it in an attempt to try and be positive about a meeting that there really wasn't anything to be positive about.
You are asking your colleagues to keep a close eye on things, and if they do come across a baby who deteriorates suddenly or unexpectedly or needs resuscitation on your unit, could they let you or Arian know?
Yes.
We know that you were aware of Child N's collapse on June 15, 2016, and you tell us that you planned to review that, but you didn't get round to reviewing it before the collapse and death of Child O and Child P.
Yes.
Did you discuss your concerns about Child N with Arian Powell?
No. It is worthwhile saying that Child N was a morbidity case, and I have said in my statement as well that I was blinded by the medical issues in the case in terms of the haemophilia that Child N had, and the difficulty with the airway that was encountered, which blinded me to the actions of Letby. So in my mind, it didn't trigger the response that I would have expected in terms of the previous email, raising concerns for a sudden collapse.
Right, thank you. We know the interaction and involvement that you had with Child O and Child P, and I just want to ask you, please, about your conversation, if indeed there was one. Overnight, between June 23rd, 2016, with Dr. Jayaram.
I can't remember having a conversation with him.
Well, Karen Townsend has given evidence that the following morning she met Dr. Jayaram in the cafeteria, and she discussed several issues with him, including the third in a list of 3, was the NNU triplets. And it's during that conversation that Karen Townsend said that Dr. Jayaram told her about the drawer of doom, the collated evidence that was in your office. Karen Townsend then went to speak to Karen Reese about it, which is what prompted her to come and speak to you, to find you in the clinic and walk back to your office with you. And we know that Karen Reese's evidence of that conversation includes her asking to see what was in the drawer, and you refusing her access to it. Now, your evidence is that none of that happened.
No. And the timings don't entirely fit either, because that suggests that Karen Reese already knew I was calling it the Drawer of Doom before I'd had that meeting with her that afternoon. Whereas my understanding of her statement is that she said I mentioned it then, and that's what she remembers. But that was after she had been tasked by Karen Townsend to go. So the timings don't add up, do they?
Did you speak to anybody on the night of June 23rd, 2016, about your concerns in terms of Letby?
I honestly can't remember whether I did or not.
All right. But you did speak to Karen Reese on the evening of 24th June?
Yes.
And it was during that conversation, I suggest, that she asked you again for evidence of your concerns about Letby, and said, in the absence of evidence, she couldn't take her off the rota for the following day.
As I have explained already, firstly, I don't think that conversation happened, and Karen Reese's repeated comments about there's no evidence really were based on the fact that I think she assumes that the evidence we somehow were hiding was some event in which we witnessed harm being done and we were hiding that from her. Actually, the evidence was quite clearly. And it was all in the thematic review. The evidence of Letby's association, the sudden and unexpected nature of the collapses, the timings of the collapses, the numbers of the collapses, the fact there was no other explanation for this. That was the evidence. And again, she was entrapped in those thoughts, having spoken to Arian Powell, who was also in that position, and unwilling to consider the concerns we were raising.
Right. But finally this, please, Doctor. The meeting with the executives on June 30th, 2016. You have told the inquiry that Tony Chambers accused you of your concerns about Letby being a convenient way of hiding your own failings. I have to suggest to you that he didn't use those words. He didn't express that sentiment. And there's no reference in the meeting notes to suggest the same?
Well, I have explained already that I don't think the meeting notes are particularly reliable anyway.
Stephen Cross's notes?
Yes.
Yes.
I specifically remember him saying it. I can specifically remember talking to colleagues at Alderhay that same summer, senior colleagues at Alderhay, talking about our problems and mentioning what he said, and their reaction being similar to ours, really. If you would like to corroborate that with them, I am quite happy for you to give them the names, and you can talk to them, to corroborate that. He definitely said that would be convenient. He definitely looked away and said it, yes.
You expressed that you were irritated with Karen Reese's interjections during the course of that meeting. And in your view, you didn't need evidence of someone pulling out a tube or injecting something in order to take matters further.
Well, I think the evidence that we did have was enough to escalate it to another agency.
Yes. Interesting, if I may make this point, that you chose those two examples, because of course Dr. Jairam did have evidence where he had concluded that the breathing tube of child A had been deliberately taken out. And of course Dr. ZA had noticed that the insulin levels were suggestive on another child of external provision. But neither of those two matters were brought to the attention of the executives at that stage?
Well, we weren't aware of the insulin at that stage. And Dr. Jairam didn't witness her taking the tube out of the baby.
But concluded that that is what had happened?
Well, he witnessed her coming to the side of the cot side as described in the court case.
Thank you.
So, that would be the epitome of no evidence. But actually it turned out, on further, that it was.
Thank you, Dr. Brearey, my lady. That is all I ask.